Hello, welcome. This is the Being Fine live chat. Welcome to those of you who are watching live and on Facebook or on YouTube, and also welcome to those who are listening after the event. Very exciting to have these Wednesday night, 7 o'clock GMT gatherings, and these are the authors of the Being Fine book, Being Fine, the Other F Word. My name is Jo Baldwin-Trott, and I'm the editor and publisher of the book. And there's a very significant and clear message to the book, and that is that we must really step into our value. And actually, I think that's one of the ways of looking at it. So many different ways of looking at what this book offers, but step into our value of being heard, of speaking up when we're struggling, and sharing the words that we need to with someone who can care for us and help us. So rather than using this F word, the other F word, I'm fine. It's really important, especially now, and actually, especially I think post Christmas, when there may be even more struggles, when people have lose that thing to look forward to. So I'm very thrilled tonight to have two of the authors here. One of my staples on a Wednesday night. I'm very grateful to Kapil Gupta. Hi, Kapil.
Hi, Joe.
Thanks for coming along again.
Yeah, it's great. I love these weekly conversations now.
It's become part of my week, has it for you as well? It's just like, oh, that's in the diary.
Yeah, for sure.
Fantastic. We always manage to cover such a diverse conversation around the same, obviously, theme. But I'm very thrilled to have our main special guest author this week is John Watson Allison. Hi, John.
Hi, Joe. Thank you very much for having me tonight. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Oh, no, it's really great to have you. John is the founder of Motion to Mind, Under a Tarp, and has an incredible story. Overcoming adversity is a very kind of general term for what John has done, and it's a lot to do with leaving the forces, which he did. But we're going to start by talking about one of the fundamental and actually incredible messages, which is your work, and this is the under a tarp challenge that you're offering, John. So let's kick off with what you're up to right now. What's happening?
Thank you, Joe. So yes, I recently launched the Under a Tarp challenge, and essentially, as the name suggests, it involves spending some time underneath a tarpaulin shelter. And essentially, people may be familiar with like a standard sort of sleep out in response to raising funds for homeless charities, for example. And this is taking it a stage further. But more importantly, the Under a Tarp challenge is essentially about giving anybody anywhere in the world a vehicle to raise funds for a homeless charity of their choice. And the idea behind it as well is primarily to raise funds for homeless charity, but also it's to raise global awareness of the amazing work that the homeless charities are doing all over the world, but also the reasons why people find themselves homeless as well. And for me, it's again taking it a stage further. We want people to actually go out and to construct a shelter that will protect them from the elements for one night. And you can stay out longer if you want to, but the aim of the challenge is to go out for one night to build a shelter and to spend one night in it, and to using the hashtag Under a Tarp challenge. Then we'll tag us in and we'll actually share the message. And the idea behind it is that you can select your own homeless charity, you can create your own fundraising page, and use it as a vehicle for getting out and actually raising funds for charity. And we're doing that already now. So it's I think for me, building a shelter is actually a bit of a metaphor for life as well. And people typically these days we're losing some of those traditional life skills, like how to go out and protect yourself in the elements and protect yourself against the weather. So I find in a lot of the work I do with Motion to Mind, for example, that it's deeply empowering for a lot of people to be able to go out and develop these life skills and to go out and build a shelter, because it generates self-confidence, and it's a really deeply empowering thing for people as well. So there's a big resilience element in it, and a self-confidence and a element to it as well, without shadow of a doubt.
It sounds amazing. Yeah, no, I think it's a fantastic idea, and obviously, the homeless situation was bad anyway before we had this awful virus that has swept our planet. So I think it's fantastic what you're doing. So Under a Tarp challenge, and where can people find that? Just while we're We'll come back to it in a second.
No, thanks, Joe. If people go to underatarp.co.uk or underatarp.com, there's a whole raft of information and videos on there, and critically safety points for it as well. So it's all there, underatarp.co.uk or underatarp.com. Thanks, Joe.
Fantastic. No, it's amazing to raise awareness for these charities. They work so hard, don't they? And obviously you do know a fair bit about sleeping under a tarp, and probably the stars, and in fact under a sign. So let's kind of
yeah, I mean certainly, I mean obviously as a child I was building dens and shelters. I mean I was very fortunate that my grandfather had a 150-acre estate on Dartmoor, believed to be the basis for Baskerville Hall and the Baskervilles, and so I was very, very fortunate. Sadly, it was sold when I joined the army in 1987. But I developed an interest early on for building shelters. Obviously joined the army and slept in some very funny places, including under an Avis rent-a-car car park in Kuwait airport when the ceasefire was signed during the first Gulf War. But yeah, so going back to the A&E sign, it wasn't necessarily a sign, but unfortunately, I've been out of the army for a couple of years, and a long story short, the wheels came off a little bit, and for a number of reasons I can go into later. But I found myself actually sleeping in my van in the car park of the local A&E hospital at Tunbridge Wells, and I felt safe in my van at the time. My van was really the one sort of constant form of accommodation that I had after I left the army. But also, I found myself that unfortunately, I didn't realize at the time, but I was essentially burning myself out, and I was getting palpitations, all those things, and essentially, I thought I was going to have a heart attack at one point, and I thought, well, I might as well take some form of action, and I still believe to this day that it doesn't matter what you do, but taking action is really important in any bad situation. And for me, taking action at the time, although maybe a little misguided, was driving down in my van and parking in the A&E car park overnight in case I had a heart attack. So my logic was that if I have a heart attack, I might as well be outside the front door, and they can sort me out quicker. And yeah, so the wheels came off a little bit, and things weren't particularly good, and it really culminated in me feeling safer in my van and actually parking in the car park of A&E in case I had a heart attack. And I think there's obviously a longer story, but the lesson for me was that I could go through 24 years of an army career, specializing in Royal Engineer bomb disposal and counter-terrorism for most of my career, and thriving in that world, and then suddenly finding that the wheels were coming off in civilian life, and I never thought in a million years that never happened to me.
Yeah, because obviously it can't be. It must be challenging for everyone who's in the forces like you were. But you were in some incredibly stressful situations, like you say, and 24 years. So what was you'd left the army, and there was a point, wasn't there, when suddenly, as I sort of put in the little blurb for this, life really caught up with you.
Yeah, I think for me, this is. I mean, again, in the work I do with clients today, I draw extensively on my military experience, but also my experience in dealing with the major transition that for me was leaving the military. And I must stress that many people, many service leavers go on to thrive very well in the civilian world. But for me, I'd left school at 16, and the only job I'd ever known was essentially the military. And long story short, when I left the military, I ultimately became self-employed. Self-employment was really my first job, and I didn't really know what I was doing, and I was trying to make sense of business, and I was literally, I didn't have a clue about marketing, because if you bear in mind in the military, it's not about financial gain; it's all about helping your mates and achieving the mission. And in the civilian world, it's a little bit different. There's a lot of a lot of people in it purely for financial gain and everything else. And for me, I had to learn to find that middle ground somewhere, really. And I was doing a lot of stuff for free and everything else, and I'd never dealt with HMRC before, for example. I'd never completed my own tax return. All those things were very, very alien. So that was one side of it. And also, I wasn't used to not being paid. So, for example, have to remember, in the military, for 24 years, without fail, I never once had an issue with pay in the army. And my money would be in my account on the final working day of every month for 24 years. And of course, I became self-employed, and I would submit an invoice. And to most people, this is a minor thing. It can be a source of heartache as well, of course. But to me, it was an alien thing that I'd submit my invoice and then expect to get paid on a certain day. And then suddenly I checked the cash machine and hadn't been paid. And that to me was a major, whoa, what's going on? And it was little things like that were completely new to me. And there was that side of it, all the marketing, learning the marketing side of life, and getting to grips with what self-employment really meant, coupled with things like accommodation. And accommodation for me was always a bit of an issue. And I found myself, I was living on a farm, and the farm manageress, she was an amazing woman. She was really incredibly helpful to me. But it was an amazing place in summertime, but in winter there was nobody there, and it was deserted. And I found myself, working quite late at night, coming back to the farmhouse, literally to an empty farmhouse in the middle of nowhere. And it took me some time to really realize that I needed to. I was so used to being around people. For example, in the army, you're living on camp, or living on base, and you're living in the mess on barracks. There's always somebody around. You could always hear somebody, and I found that quite comforting. So for me, suddenly to find myself, I was struggling. To be fair, struggling with the whole self-employment thing, but also the accommodation side of it in winter, middle of nowhere. The only company I actually had, it sounds crazy, but it was at one point was a tomcat called Logan. And I'd be working on my laptop till the wee small hours, and I'd hear this scratching on the door, and it was Logan. And he'd come in and jump on my lap and fall asleep. And to me, that was remarkably comforting and calming. So all I'll say as an aside, people that say that animals have saved their lives and everything else, I can understand it, because Logan was a major source of comfort. So the wheels are coming off a little bit, but also I lost my mother and brother while I was serving in the army, and I think to be fair, I'd actually buried it. I'd compartmentalized it. Never really grieved properly for their loss. My father was going in for a skin cancer operation around the same sort of time as I was. All this stuff was going on, and I suddenly sort of had these thoughts that I might lose the only real family I had. And of course, I have other family, but I guess I was feeling that if my father goes, then who else have I got? And that was very, very difficult. But also I was doing crazy things, like I was having problems sleeping at night, and so I was taking probably a typical military bloke's approach, and I was running up and down hills in the nighttime, thinking it would help me sleep, but in actual fact, it's making me more and more wired. So there's so many things that I was doing which weren't serving me, and actually were making things worse. And again, fast forwarding, ultimately, I hadn't slept properly for several days for a long time, and so I went to see my GP because I knew things weren't good. And she said to me that chances are I'm going to diagnose generalized anxiety disorder, and was given diazepam and sleeping tablets and all that sort of stuff. And and that was interesting, because she also recommended things like mindfulness and all that sort of stuff. She's a really enlightened doctor as well. But for me, the label, being diagnosed with GAD, for me was just a label, and in some ways I feel that the label enables a GP to prescribe certain forms of medication. In actual fact, my strategies weren't serving me. The things I was doing in life just weren't serving me. My thinking patterns weren't serving me. My lifestyle wasn't serving me at the time either. So no real surprise that the wheels were coming off. And I think for me, ultimately, it was that recognition that actually that my lifestyle choices and my strategies weren't serving me, that enabled me to turn everything around. And in actual fact, I really feel that I wasn't self-aware enough, and essentially what it was, I was knackered. And when you're exhausted physically, then mentally it's very, very hard to get on top of your game as well. And the wheels came off. So yeah, so just some idea of what was going on.
That's a hell of a lot to go through. I think just one of those things to suddenly become self-employed is a major thing. You know, that is especially if
Mm.
you have really been used to that incredibly stable financial life, as well as environment of the services. But from another point of view, just that whole kind of setting, going from, like you say, being surrounded by people. I mean, one of those is quite a lot for you to deal with, isn't it? But it just, you know, it's incredible. You know, it's amazing what we put ourselves through without any actual moment to kind of consider what we're actually doing to ourselves as a human. And I think this is part of Kapil's work, which hopefully he'll share in a minute. But, you know, I think this is very much valuing what we're putting ourselves through.
Yeah, I think, you know, another important lesson for me was the fact that, I mean, the MOD are now doing some sterling work preparing people more effectively for leaving. But there's an issue here, because sometimes you don't know what you don't know, and you know, you can do all the preparation before you leave, but sometimes it takes a year or two before you actually realize what perhaps you're missing from the services and everything else. So for me, I certainly found that. I found that it was actually 2 years in, nearly 2 years in, that I actually realized that, actually, hang on a minute, I've lost the military family, I've lost that structure and all those things. So yeah, it's interesting, because you know, people have to remember that they shouldn't be overly hard on themselves. Sometimes it takes time to actually to understand what you need, and what your new purpose is. All those things. It's really important to consider that, and you won't get it straight away.
Yeah, no, right. And also, we are tribal, aren't we? We are meant to be, you know, really good to have time out, really good to spend time by yourself, but we are designed to be with others.
Absolutely, and you know, and the military in many ways is you could argue it is a form of tribal society. You know, it's in a good way, of course. You know, and it's you get used to your mates. Your mates are part your squadron or your troop or your section. That they're your tribe, and of course, when you go away on operations with them, you become an even tighter tribe. And I know people that would rather spend time with their military tribe than their family members in certain cases, and of course that's counterproductive as well. But those bonds become so tight after a period of time.
Well, and you go through so much that is so significant, don't you? And I can relate as being an ex-police officer. Experiences that you go through, they're profound. That you can't actually define them or explain them very well to, you know. And I know you've seen some serious. I don't like that phrase, but the action you've seen it. You know, and that is. It's hard to relate to, isn't it? But you know, and also I think it is so important for there to be that support network. But there is hope for that, isn't there? Which is great.
I think on that point, Joe, one thing I'd like to make, I'm keen to make, is that there's a lot of talk about the military, and some of the, you know, people talk about the military in a negative sense, and in terms of the experiences that we have. And you know, for me, I was quite fortunate. You know, I saw some nasty stuff, but not as much as some people perhaps. And but equally, I'm grateful for those experiences, because it makes you appreciate life far more. It makes you appreciate what we've actually got to a greater extent. And you know, we talk about lockdown in this country, but when you see how people are operating and living in other parts of the world, this is nothing. And you know, and you never make that comparison. Is what people are used to. But the reality is that, you know, the experiences that many of us have had in the military, they leave us feeling more grateful for the life we've got, and that's really important.
Yeah, and let's bring Kapil in here, because obviously, you know, a regular one of our certain regular things that are in these calls are very much the fact it's a gift almost that you've come back to the other end. Oh, sorry, there's some. Hopefully, that's not background noise my end. But
is there background noises here?
I'm not sure. It might be Kapil. Oh, we're good now, I think. So I think you know, obviously seeing the experience of coming through it, and your work now, John, is incredible what you're doing with it. Kapil, you're similar, aren't you? You've that adversity that you've gained through your experience has allowed you to go on to do what you're doing now.
Yeah, for sure. I was going to say the experience with self-employment and HMRC, that's not just specific to military. I think I'm now in my second business, and I'm still trying to figure out how all these things work. So I think that's an ongoing. But I also really like what you said about it takes a couple of years for us to realize what we actually need when we come out of a scenario like that. And that's been my experience. And whether when I've been part of a community or part of an organization, it's like when you leave that set way of life and you go out, it's like, and I think we talked about this when we met John at the TEDx Lambeth. It's like this place where you can theoretically tell people, oh, you should expect this, this, and this after you go out from here. But until people go through their own life experiences, they don't actually take that in. It's like theoretical knowledge versus experiential. And one of the big things for me has been just that experiential learning over the last 7-8 years, moving my career and the life transformation work.
I think your point there, Kapil, about experience is essentially at the heart of a lot of the work I do, because even the Under the Tarp Challenge is an experience,
right?
And we can do all the talking we want to, and and there's a lot of talk at the moment, but actually, when people really experience something, that's when the magic happens.
Right, totally.
Because they feel it, and that's really powerful, and it often leads to behavior change and all those things as well, without a doubt.
Absolutely. And I think at my work, one of the things I say to people, and it's been true for me, there was a period, I think almost of 3-4 years, when I didn't read any book. I wasn't like getting any knowledge, any theoretical knowledge. It was all about actually learning through experience. Go in, do the work, and then learn from that. And I see that quite an interesting thing. I think especially with the mental health work that we are we're talking about. A second. I live in Hackney, so it's a busy.
Have to be arrested, Phil.
I think it's one of the high areas with COVID at the moment. So there's a lot of ambulance and everything. But anyway, so the thing that I see quite a lot is when people struggle, we usually go for theoretical understanding. It's like, oh, if intellectually I get something, it will change my life. But that is not my experience. I think unless and until you put it into practice and go through the experiences, life doesn't change. At least there's no sustainable change.
I think quite a good analogy, or quite a good example of that would be, people are being pushed towards apps on their phone these days. And there are some excellent apps, and I've used them myself. But an app doesn't replace actually physically getting out and doing something or experiencing something. And I do have some concerns that as the world progresses and technology evolves, that people perhaps are going to be too sort of reliant on apps, and rather than getting out and getting themselves involved in real life experience, and physically experiencing things, which leads to mental, physical growth. So we've got to be careful.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think that's a really good, valid point, isn't it? And obviously we can watch videos, we can watch live streaming like people are doing now, but and it's really important that we take ourselves out of our comfort zone as well, isn't it? Because you just said, John, we can all look at our situations right now and think, oh yeah, it's less than ideal, but it is incredibly hard for so many people throughout the world right now that are really have so little.
If you think about it, Joe, so I mean, for example, a lot of my military veteran colleagues will have no problem sleeping out in all weathers for one night. That's a piece of cake for most of my military colleagues and friends. But for a lot of people, going out underneath a homemade tarp shelter is something so alien, and I can almost guarantee that for some people it can be a bit of a game changer, because they actually think, hang on a minute, I've built a shelter that can actually protect me from the elements, but I survived. And even just going out for one night, in a form of micro adventure, leads to a mini adventure and a major adventure. And all of a sudden, the big trajectory, the big momentum builds up, and people start to look at life. And spending one night out, even in the back garden, in weather like this, obviously observing safety precautions, you come back into your warm house and you really appreciate it. You know, how many people have actually, you know, the power's suddenly gone off and they've lost everything, lost power, they've lost heat. You know, and we're just not used to it. So experiences are really, really important, and that's part of the Under a Tarp challenge, without a shadow of a doubt.
Well, and it's the interesting thing you just said about is if we question whether we'll be able to survive, and that's a whole fascinating kind of question, isn't it? Because it's what we relate to surviving and what we feel we need to survive, and actually we don't need very much, do we? And I think that's quite an empowering. That's a really empowering moment, isn't it, to realise that you need so little to actually survive.
I mean, so right. I mean, if we look at the start of the so-called, I mean, even the word lockdown is nonsense. But you know, we look at the start of the so-called lockdown, and again the panic buying toilet rolls and everything else, as if our lives depended on it. And you know, again, I've been in Bosnia where people had literally been bombed out of the houses. People had to make homemade water wheels to generate from the local river to generate power, because there was no power, no communications, nothing. And you know, and people were having to go out and forage for food in the woods. You know, that's in Europe. I was in Europe, you know, and I mean, thankfully, most people in this country perhaps haven't had that experience, and hopefully won't. But when you've had that experience, or when you've seen, again, this is where it comes to military service, for example, you see some of this stuff and you realise just how lucky we are, and how grateful I am to have to be in a warm house tonight.
Yeah, and that's so important. It's, you know, we need to keep reminding ourselves of what we do have, don't we, rather than yeah, no, it's really, I think it's fantastic. This Under a Tarp challenge is amazing, John. And let's just come on to we'll give the details out again in a second. But so what drew you to writing in the book? And obviously we met at your TED Talk, which I forgot to mention at the beginning. So I'm in honoured company with two TED talkers, TED speakers. But what drew you to the book, and what are you hoping that the book achieves, John?
I think for me, I've done a lot of speaking, and you know, and people often see me at the front, and they read my bio, 24 years in the army, you know, bomb disposal, all this sort of stuff. And then, you know, when I come up and stand in front of them, or do a Zoom call, whatever it is, and I say, look, you know, at one point I was diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder. You know, people suddenly think, hang on a minute, if it can happen to him, it can happen to anybody. And you know, I think, and it's the same with homelessness. It can happen to anybody. And for me, I think it's about being prepared to tell your story, which is really important. And hopefully, the chapter will help to perhaps inspire other friends and colleagues or readers to write their story as well, or when the time permits and when it's safe to do so, for that person to read the chapter and read the other stories that have been written in the book, and actually feel inspired to tell their own story as well, and actually and not be afraid to tell the story. Because I think when people see what the people have been through and how they've dealt with it and move forward, that can be deeply empowering as well. So I think for me, it's partly about being open and honest with people, and actually saying that it's all right. It's all right to be not to be in a good place. You know, it's all right to say to people you need help and all those things. Because also often, particularly blokes, you know, we tend to bury your head in the sand, and I know a lot of people who, you know, very outwardly extremely strong people, but inwardly there could be a lot of stuff going on, and they wouldn't necessarily reach out for help. And so again, if one of the chapters in the book prompts someone to reach out for help alone, that's being well worth writing for the book, without shadow of a doubt.
Yeah, brilliant. I totally agree. That's really who we're looking for. Is it that one person that needs that sort of inspiration, or that nudge to take some action? And like you say, I think
sorry, Joe, as well. I mean, what I would say as well, I think it's really important is that, you know, it's okay to be challenged. It's okay to be feeling under pressure. It's okay to be feeling like, hang on a minute, you know, can I do this? And it's a normal part of human life. And again, you don't have to be the hard man or the hard person all the time. You know, it's okay to struggle.
Yeah, and it's not failing. It's not failing. It's human life.
It's learning.
Human life. That's all it is. It's really that simple. And all your stories. Kapil, are you working?
I think the permission part is really, really important. Like in my work with men, a lot of the things that I find, and especially in men's groups, what happens is when people come in for the first time, what they experience is permission. like that they can be vulnerable, allow their feelings and allow themselves to fail, and all those sharing all of themselves, not just this part which is like I have to show up in a certain way, that I know everything and I perform and all that kind of stuff. And I think that is really one of the key parts of this book, with all these amazing stories. I think for people to get the permission that they can, life is messy, you know, and it's okay for life to be messy, and it's okay to ask for help, um, or to reach out when you need something. And I think that is such a powerful piece in the book.
I think just one brief point as well. I think it's equally important to balance the books a little bit, because you know it's important to be open and to reach out for help, but equally it's important to celebrate your wins and to be proud of what you've achieved and proud of what you're doing as well, because they don't want people to go through life only discussing the bad stuff. It's about people celebrating their wins, their successes, and sharing that as well with people. That's really important.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we're especially in the UK, I think we're an anti-brag culture.
Yeah,
You're not allowed to kind of, talk up, speak up, and talk about your successes. And gosh, that could be one of the core reasons that this whole situation exists in a way, because actually we should be able to celebrate what we achieve in a more open way, and instead of just it's like the money situation, isn't it? It's another area that the British generally, and I'm generalizing, but don't like to talk about. Actually,
reserved.
Why not just be open, and whatever that means to you, with the extremes of, I think all these topics, including mental health, are like the taboo topics, and they don't get spoken about. All we want to do, or talk about, is what you do. What do you do for a living? It's so meaningless. It's like it has no value, really.
I think any form of suppression, be it suppressing the good stuff or suppressing the bad stuff, isn't healthy. So expression versus suppression is really important. I think definitely.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much, guys. John, you have done an incredible amount of work, and I'm really, really excited for your Under a Tarp challenge, underatarp.com or underatarp.co.uk. Join John in this challenge to raise money, support the homeless charities that really do need our help. My brain has been whirring just while you were mentioning it earlier, thinking, how are me and my kids gonna? Okay, well, I love a challenge.
Enjoy it.
So I'm going to think about that. We do have a tent. I guess that kind of qualifies. It doesn't really, does it?
No, it's fine, Joe. I mean, what I would say as well, on our YouTube channel, we've got Under Tarp YouTube channel, and it's I've deliberately made lots of instructional videos. There's a lot more to come as well, winter survival stuff as well. But a lot of ideas about how you can build a shelter and all that sort of stuff. So a lot of ideas to inspire people as well.
Fantastic. Well, that sounds amazing. I really, really love your work. That's brilliant. So thank you so much, John. John is at motiontomind.com.co.uk, but obviously your challenge at the moment is really part of your work, and we'll link people to you as well, won't it? We'll probably see John on the BBC again, and hear him on radio again, because he's all over the place. And I'm sure we'll see you back on the TED stage again. When are your TED Talks live, both of you? Do you know?
No idea. Should be in the next few weeks. I think because of COVID, the video production work had to be stopped. So I think it should all be back on now. So within the next few weeks.
So once they're up, obviously you must share them into the Being Fine book group, which is where this is being streamed live too. We will look forward to watching your TED Talks. Obviously, I was honoured to watch them live, and they were both remarkable and really powerful. So it'd be great to get those out there too. The book will be out very soon. It's being sort of worked on and tweaked, and all the rest of the things that need to happen. We will hopefully have a pre-release date, a pre-order date imminently, so that people can start buying this incredible book, a very important message to not use the other F word. So I'm Jo Baldwin-Trott. I'd just like to say thank you to Kapil for popping in again. Great to see you, Kapil.
Thanks, Jo. Thanks, John.
Thanks very much. And John Watson Allison, thank you for being our guest author tonight and sharing your remarkable story. And that's it from me. We'll see you next week. Thanks, guys.
Thanks a lot. Take care.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Bye. Bye.